Hi, this is Pincha Ashti, and this video will be the first of its kind. I am a graphic designer by profession, and I'm going to show you my process for how I come up with a logo and the subsequent branding material. So I hope you enjoy. Alright, so this is a basic logo design. I'm going to walk you through a bit of the process of how I work. Some of these sketches were meant to be retro. I wanted to go for like a really like 1950s, kind of go back in time with all these designs. That's what these little moons were. But this one here, I was like, well, you know what? Why don't I go even further back in time? So I decided to go all the way back to 1920, 100 years ago, with a certain art style called Art Nouveau. I really like illustration. That was really kind of the mentality behind this logo creation was how how much could I challenge myself with a very very complex logo. Now this is usually how I make a logo, vectors, but this one in particular, the Art Nouveau one, the Moon Girl Soda, this goes in a totally different direction in that I'm really more putting my illustration skills to the test. There was very little references in terms of how I came up with this design. I've drawn like dancers before. I've drawn women kind of like in like these very like ethereal poses. Um, but I really wanted to kind of go with this very Art Nouveau style. And it's funny, most of the women in Art Nouveau tend to look very Greek. So I think originally this sketch, this female had like a very aquiline nose, which you see later. I end up erasing and I end up changing. And same with the hairstyles. First, she started off with like a very kind of short like bob haircut. Then I had like straight hair, and right now she has like all these like curls and waves, and that just kind of goes in line with the whole like Art Nouveau style. But this is all totally different to me, totally new. I used to be like a fan of like trading card collecting, but that was more like Pokemon cards. I know some people are probably gonna look at this and be like, "Was is this like a Yu-Gi-Oh card, or is this like a uh, like what is it called, a tarot card?" Like I mean, maybe like those aren't things that I referenced in this particular piece. Mostly just looked at advertising from the 1920s. I was listening to things, like jazz, very like classical piano kind of stuff while I was drawing this. Um, but yeah, the idea behind this was to definitely to challenge myself with things I had never drawn before. So some of these trees, some of these windows, some of these geometric shapes are things that I had never really drawn before. I'm not the kind of artist who sits around and like draws pretty flowers, or anything like that. So that's definitely something new to me. These trees were actually referenced by the room that I'm staying at here in Mexico. My window's just covered in trees, and so I was looking at the way that the shadows and the light kind of played with each other, and I was like, oh, I could probably draw that. Um, a lot of these little flares. I looked at some references, some photography stuff, but I kind of just let my mind and my hands just kind of loose with the whole thing, just kind of go. Here's me designing the font, which I personally I love fonts. I probably looked at like maybe 30 different fonts for this logo. And here's I'm trying to, with every image, with every piece of art, there has to be like a sense of balance to it as well. And so it had like a frame within a frame, but then I started looking at some of the things that I was drawing, and I was like, oh, maybe I can make the image of this one a little bit larger, and maybe use some of these flares as frame pieces instead of actual straight lines. And so that's kind of where this all went. Yeah, and so one thing you'll notice about me drawing, and this is with all my drawings, I spend a lot of time with pencils, and I do all my stuff digitally, but I have been drawing for years. I've drawn everything. Uh, I used to draw a lot of like superhero stuff, and so I used to always spend my time with like pencils and actual paper and pens. And so once I went digital, it kind of I had to create some of my own brushes, but I still basically kept the same techniques. The cool thing is that with digital stuff, you can you place everything in layers. You don't have to like go and erase. You don't have all these like pencil marks at the end of your drawing. It ends up being very very clean. And same with like these ink lines. They're on separate layers. The entire outline of her is on one layer, whereas all the lines on the inside of the drawing are on a separate layer. And I had to make the outline very thick as per the Art Nouveau style, which I think I used like a 7.5 pen, and then for the inside I use 4. And it's kind of funny because in real life, when I draw with pen, especially if I'm using like a Pilot brand pen, which is like my favorite kind of pen, I tend to use 7 and 5. And so it's kind of funny that like I would do that in real life and then do it also in digital, which I think is just it's just really neat how certain things are kind of consistent throughout. And really just art is really just my thing. I mean, I love art in all its forms and all its aspects. And I remember when I first started graphic design school, um, my professors would tell me, we did everything our first year on paper and pen, and I was like, oh, easy, cake. But once we started getting into the computers and stuff, I would fall behind. But my teachers would always tell me that the beauty of graphic design as a career is that you constantly have to keep learning things. It's one of those careers that you kind of have to keep up with the times, keep up with technology, and I think it's great. I think it's a great challenge. I love learning, and so this piece was it's kind of been that. It's been a little bit of a refresher course too. Um, I've worked a lot of like in print and marketing and stuff. So this whole thing, apart from this logo, you're gonna see later on, I end up designing the can, I end up designing the label for the bottle, and I end up designing the case, the holder. So that's all stuff that I have experience in from working in prepress. But I also wanted to kind of challenge myself as an artist and as a designer, and be like, okay, how much detail can I give into this one piece, and then how many of those details and those elements can I then incorporate into the whole branding of this fictional brand. I literally just made this up. I'm a sucker for, like, I don't normally drink soda. I'm kind of more of a coffee and water guy. But on the occasion that I do drink a soda, I'll either drink like a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola with like a burger because it's pretty good. It's a slice of Americana. But I also like cherry soda, strawberry sodas and stuff like that. And so some of those, that's kind of where this came from. Like I had one just hanging around the house for the longest time, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna buy me a steak. And so I bought a steak, had my cherry soda. So that's kind of where this came from. The flowers, again going back to the whole idea that like I'm not the kind of guy who sits around drawing pretty flowers. And these are moonflowers actually. I had to do some research and look at a couple of like, references. But they're called moonflowers because when they're in full bloom, um, they're very circular, and so they're white, and they stand out in the night, so they look like moons. But the really cool thing is that when they're not in full bloom, they look like stars. So when you get a field of them, you kind of get a field of the moon and the stars with these flowers. And so I was like, obviously Moon Girl, and Art Nouveau tends to be a blend of like architecture, of floral design, of like model design, like kind of like Greek art. This is emerging out of like the early Industrial Revolution kind of stuff. Early advertising. If you look at anything from 1920s, it's all like Art Nouveau-ish. Um, J.C. Leyendecker was one of my favorite artists, but he drew more like markers, and so he didn't do like the intense black outlines. He kind of evolved from that. But this is going back even further back. Um, and then for the color palette, I really wanted to. I looked at some of the Art Nouveau pieces, and instead of doing like because my original thought was, I'll color this thing with all the colors, just use every single color, and then do like a masking layer at the end of like one color or maybe a gradient or something. But I really wanted to kind of get into the mindset of what it might have been like, drawing something in the 1920s, designing something for the 1920s. And so I picked a color palette that limited the amount of colors so that it would look like all consistent throughout the color scheme. But I also thought about watercolors because again, I've been spending many of my years drawing and just doing illustration, and one of my favorite mediums, aside from digital, is watercolor. Like I love painting in watercolors. Um, I think they're a lot of fun. I think they're really great. And so that was kind of the mentality with these colors and this palette. Was I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to make it look like a watercolor, and I had to create a brush for that. um, and and I think it looks really good. You know, I really like these color palettes. Most of the time, if you look at my superhero illustrations, um, I'll either do a base color and then do everything in shadows, and then add the color, after the fact. But this was really kind of, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna kind of approach it like paper. I even used parchment paper as the background for the card and for the woman, um, and then did it on separate layers. But then the rest of this is all just like this watercolor brush, and and the beautiful thing about Wacom products, having a drawing tablet, is that it has all these like points of sensitivity, and not only that, but if you look at the palette, I have all these gradients, and so I was able to kind of select, uh, really light colors from the top of the gradient to then going into the more intense colors at the bottom of the gradient. And that's pretty much how I would color if I was doing this with watercolor. Of course, this is all digital, and the reason obviously we do things digital now is because you can just throw it onto, like, you'll see later on, you can throw it into a bottle, in the can, into the box, whatever, and so you have this master file that you can kind of go into. I manipulated this the font in Illustrator, kind of did a little bit of tweaking, and then I brought it into Photoshop. Um, and yeah, I think it looks really good. Still, just here with some of this stuff, just shading, it's going to be like gold brandishing. Um, but again, I had to go back and look at all these like Art Nouveau pieces, like so many references, just to get this like one unique image. And I'm really happy to say that this is all 100% me. Obviously, it looks like Art Nouveau. Fonts. I love fonts. I mean, this is like 5 or 6 different fonts that I kind of messed around with. I think I picked 3 at the end there, changing the size and the capitalization. Yeah, but design is really kind of one of those things. I do it out of passion, but I love working with clients who have a vision or who can work with me with a vision. If when I present ideas to a client, it's because I'm coming to them not only just as a designer, but as an artist. I've been doing this, creating art for years. Funny story about the aluminum can. I actually had to kind of create the can, like I used a reference, um, and then I did this layer on top of it. But the really cool thing was that this came from my superhero illustrations. If you looked at some of my other stuff that I was doing with metallics, I was like, okay, now I have to do an aluminum can. How do I make the aluminum can look as metallic as possible? So I just used the same kind of techniques that I did with my superhero stuff. These bubbles ended up looking like jelly beans. It ends up looking better in the bottle, and I end up going back and redoing all the water droplets in the can because I saved a file at one point, and I was like, yeah, that looks cool, but it doesn't look like water droplets. It looked more like little jelly beans, and I just didn't like it. And that's one of those things too, as a designer, as an artist, that you're kind of like, you know, you you kind of refresh your memory with like a tutorial or two, and then you still somehow make a mistake, and you're like, okay, how do I make this look as real as possible? And some of it really is just accidentally stumbling on something, because I think with this first image, they look like jelly beans, and then I tried recreating that here in this bottle, but the technique that I used was exactly the same, but I think I ended up organizing the files better this second time around, and then I ended up duplicating layers, and I kind of messed around with the opacity and just like the effects, the layer effects, and at the end of this bottle design, I ended up coming away with more realistic water droplets, which I really I thought was like, okay, I didn't like the jelly beans on the can. I'm gonna go ahead and redo those. And that's kind of the thing with design too, is you always kind of want to get like a really like an eye-catching aesthetic, and obviously you also want it to be as realistic as possible, and you want the appeal to be there on the product, and I just really wanted this bottle to look you know, like it just came out of like the ice chest, and oh yeah, you know, you're ready to drink yourself a cherry soda. You know, get yourself a burger, get yourself a hot dog, get yourself a slice of pizza or something, and sit down with your Moon Girl cherry soda. And yeah, it's funny. I came up with the taglines. Was it to the moon and back? And then the other one was by golly, you know, because that's I was like, how would they advertise this in the 1920s, right? And yeah, I like doing voices, so I'm sitting around doing this design, and I come up with the catch line, the phrase by golly, and I'm like, by golly, moon girl cherry soda, you know, just that kind of the old 1920s, you know, vaudevillian, you know, announcer kind of thing, which I think was really fun. This was really a fun project. It took me, man, okay, I'll be honest with you. This took me about uh, the illustration itself took me about, I want to say about 2 weeks, maybe a total of. I haven't looked at the videos and how long it took, but maybe about it might have been about like 10 hours, maybe more, or maybe less. But at the same time, I was working a part time job when I started it, and then I traveled, made some friends, socialized a little bit, you know, kind of set this whole project to the side, and then I was like, oh wait, I have this project, and I need to get it done, so I need to just isolate myself some more and get it done. And so once I got the illustration going again, everything else fell into place within like 2 days, 3 days. Um, yeah, so that you know, that's design. I love it. I do it out of love. I do it out of passion. I do it for the joy of it. All right, this is Pinch Archie signing off. I am a graphic designer by profession. I'm gonna go ahead and leave all the links to my Instagram, my Facebook, my email down below, and I am available. If you wish to hire me, please send me an email to elarchote@gmail.com, or you can also find me on Facebook as Pinche Archie Studio, and you can drop me a message. And I really enjoy doing this kind of stuff. I love creating illustrations and layout design for customers. So yeah, hit me up, let me know, and if you want to subscribe to my channel, please do so. If you want to leave a comment, please do so. Other than that, I hope you enjoy my work.